Welcome back to another episode of Capes and Tights. I'm Justin. That's Adam. We're here to talk No Way Home, Spider-Man. Adam, I actually, before we get started, I told you I was going to read off all the stuff about the big movie. I still don't know why did they go with Homecoming? Okay, this is going to be a nitpicking thing for me. This is actually going to be possibly a negative thing, which I don't normally say. Homecoming made sense because the original idea was like, obviously it was Homecoming, the dance, the first movie, but also like it was like also like for us, people who know the story behind how Sony owned the rights and Marvel Cinematic Universe became successful, and now so it was kind of like a homecoming. Like it almost sounded like when they first announced that Marvel and Sony had partnered together to make these movies, that they were like, "Oh, he's coming home. It's his homecoming," and then they named the movie that. But then the second movie was called Far From Home. And then this last movie is called No Way Home. What's the connection? We have no idea what the connection with home is. Like, why is home is this big thing with Spider-Man? It doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know.
I'm like you. I think somebody they said Homecoming and they're like, we got to run with this theme so that it's all tied together. I don't know. That's a good question.
Is this going to be the home trilogy? And then if they continue making movies, it's going to be a different thing. They go
the
away from the
trilogy.
The next movie better be next. If they make another movie, they better not say the word home in it. They're running out of puns. They're running out of sayings. But that's just my first little gripe. I wanted to start off on a negative.
Good. There you go.
Because there's going to be a lot of positives from here. The Spider-Man No Way Home. It came out on digital a week early. It was not supposed to be on digital until the day this episode dropped, which is March 22nd. And they came out with it a week early, which originally the rumors had that it was actually coming out like the very first of the month. So the date of digital moved around a little bit, but I don't know if that had to do with ticket sales. If like ticket sales dropped enough over the past few weeks that they're like, let's get that revenue out there and get it into homes or whatever. But it came on the screens December 17th. This is the first movie that Taylor, my wife, and I actually went and saw in the theaters in 2 years plus. The only other movie we saw before that was Far From Home, which is kind of funny on that side of it. We saw it on the 19th of December. So I had to keep my ass quiet with Adam freaking 3 months, basically. And but it's worth it. I'm glad I didn't spoil anything for Adam. Obviously, some things might have been spoiled for him on the internet, right? I mean, I'm guessing with Twitter and all that stuff. It's
were
hard.
Not, man. I was blacked out on that movie, so I was totally surprised by stuff.
I'm glad I didn't spoil anything. But
no, not at all.
Another complaint: it was 2.5 hours. That's not. You know my stance on 90-minute movies. But it was a lot in 2.5 hours. I think it was well done 2.5 hours. I think there's times when we talk about movies or TV shows where like, okay, you could probably cut out 30 minutes of that movie and made it a 2-hour movie, but I don't think they could have on this movie. The budget was $200 million, which is pretty high for a freaking technically like a solo character film. I mean, you're talking $250 to $300 million was like Avengers Infinity War and stuff like that. So $200 million for technically one person film is different. However, Adam, I think they got their money back.
Oh yeah.
It's the 6th highest film of all time, right behind Infinity War with $1.885 billion and counting, because there are theaters that are showing the film as we speak right now still, which is absolutely insanity. It's obviously the highest grossing Spider-Man film. It's the highest grossing solo film. Like, again, it's not the team films, even though there's multiple Spider-Man spoilers. Spoilers, there's multiple Spider-Mans in this movie. 8.6 on IMDb, which is pretty much higher than the two first ones were both came in at 7.4. Yeah. So that's a drastically higher. Rotten Tomatoes had a 93% critic and 98% audience. So that's the what's called the statistics of the movie. It's directed by John Watts, who also directed Homecoming and Far From Home, and is gonna be directing the upcoming unknown title, unknown date Fantastic Four movie, which was pretty cool, I think. Written by Chris McKenna and Eric Summers, produced by Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal. So Kevin Feige is the Marvel side, Amy Pascal does the Sony side, so that's pretty cool. It starred Tom Holland, Zendaya, and I'll go on and on and on about these people that are in it, but I think we should talk about them as we come to them.
Sounds good.
Because it's cool to see those people in it. One thing I wanted to talk to Adam about for so long is the fact that Charlie Cox was in this movie as Matt Murdock from Daredevil.
I saw that on screen. I was like, oh, Justin's going to hate or would have hated to have held that in because we've talked about it so many times.
There was that time where I'm like, oh, baby. And we're like, kind of like ambiguously talking about maybe they'll put people from the Netflix series in the Marvel stuff, and we didn't know, but I knew. I was like, no, I know there's Daredevil in this movie, which was badass because he's not Daredevil. That's another thing. Was I'll give credit to I mean I'm watching the Netflix stuff now again, and they didn't basically make Daredevil until the final episode of the first season of that show. So like this is Charlie Cox coming on as Matt Murdock as Peter Parker's lawyer. Like that's badass. There was no Daredevil. It wasn't like all of a sudden I know our costume came down. It was like Matt Murdock belongs in New York City. Peter Parker's in New York City. Matt Murdock's a lawyer. Peter Parker needs a lawyer.
It was like
caught the brick.
Just like hard cut to that scene. I love like it. I went, oh, when it happened, because there was no fade. There was no like hint of Daredevil. There was just, he was like, so yeah, I gasped.
Yeah. And a lot of people did actually. Did you hear that Charlie Cox says the theater he snuck into to watch it, no one gasped? he felt like shit. He's like, no one knows who I am. But it also like, I know that people have talked, we've talked about this in the past about, and I just listened to a podcast this morning that reviewed or talked about the season finale of Book of Boba Fett and how that like Cad Bane in that thing and something we talked about when we talked about ours, but no one who doesn't know, or everybody who doesn't know who Cad Bane is, that character had little to do with like, why did he have such a bad, like Boba Fett have it such out for Cad Bane? No one, if you don't know who Cad Bane is and you haven't seen Clone Wars or even know about it, you don't care about this Cad Bane character. The difference between that kind of a mistake and this is Charlie Cox has a future. Like Matt Murdock is going to be in it further. So even if you knew nothing about, it's the same thing in Hawkeye with Kingpin. Like even if you knew nothing about the Netflix series, it's fan service to us because we're fans, but it's also setting up a character that you're gonna know in the future. So it's not like it's like Matt Murdock showed up as a lawyer and you'll never see him again, which would have been completely fan service and no future to it. But that was cool about it. I think that was really cool. I say formerly of Netflix, now of Disney Plus, Daredevil. Check it out. But that was cool. So that's a surprise to me. That was a very big surprise. I mean, I think some people had said that it's possible that it could happen, but it was very cool that it was actually in there. Otherwise, let's talk about the movie. The movie was amazing. I'm sorry, from start to finish.
Yep.
No real moments that seemed drawn out. I mean, obviously all battle scenes with 5 or 6 people want to have to be drawn out because there's 5 or 6 people in them. But otherwise, I love how it started right after Far From Home.
Yep.
Like it was basically Far From Home and No Way Home were one big long 5-hour movie, but split into 2 different times. I think that was the cool thing about like just transitioning from one to another. Being news fans like you and I are fans of things. The Daily Bugle stuff was fun.
Oh, it's hilarious.
Like the fact that J. Jonah Jameson, first of all, is in this movie was amazing because obviously we loved that about the other movies.
Of course.
But the fact that he is now a TV show, right, or a website instead of it being a paper, because obviously that's more modern. I love because it's like he's in a garage. Like it's like our podcast studio when we had it in my garage. It reminded me of this low budget, like we'll just do this thing. But it also reminded me of like Alex Jones.
Oh God, yeah. The
like WikiLeaks
InfoWars,
and InfoWars and all that stuff. It reminded me of like this really shitty person who like does the news, but like doesn't give a shit about anybody. Like he doesn't give it's real or not. He's just gonna say it out there and he's gonna put it out in the waves. But after he announced that Spider-Man was Spider-Man or it's Peter Parker, his studio got better. Did you notice that?
Yes.
He went from green screen to actually having a studio with people there. That was awesome. It was fun.
And the dailybugle.net edition is such a just great way of doing that. I mean, like when I first saw, you knew immediately what kind of show it was going to be.
Well, yeah, because it's also the funny thing wasn't .com. The fact that it was a .net was like you couldn't even get .com. Like .com was already taken, and they had to go with .net, which is amazing. It should have been better if it was like .co or .me or something like that, like even further.
It almost makes me feel like he left the Daily Bugle and was mad, so he just started the dailybugle.net, and they already had the dailybugle.com.
Or we're like, like the dailybugle.net with a hyphen in there or something. That like, that would have been funny. And those are the kind of nods that people that are regular viewers like Taylor probably wouldn't even like caught up on was the fact that it's like that. But for us who are nerds and B know that story behind like the Daily Bugle being a newspaper.
Exactly.
It was really fun to see that. And then like the crowds and like him dealing with all that. Now people know who he is.
Oh yeah,
is pretty crazy, and it comes from a comic book from 2007. Like the basic premise of this movie, it was a series where it was the arc was called Spider-Man One More Day, from J. Michael Straczynski and Joe Quesada in 2007, where he May gets shot, and makes a deal with Mephisto, which is really funny because people have been talking about Mephisto in the MCU for 3 years now, and this series, my Spider-Man technically goes to Mephisto in the comic book, and they still the MCU was like, no, we're still not bringing Mephisto in.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so that arch is pretty cool on that too. So, I'm going in this order. I have a bunch of notes, and Adam, I talked to Adam before this. Like, there's so much stuff to talk about that I don't even know.
I'm sitting here doing the same thing. I have like a bunch in my iPhone, and I'm just like, man, I don't even. Where do you start?
So I want to start this. I'll do a couple quick fun facts that.
Perfect.
Well, let's go. So basically, the premise of the movie, so again, spoilers, is that Peter Parker is outed as Spider-Man, as you know, from the end of Far From Home, and he has to deal with the repercussions of people knowing who he is. I did think it was pretty crazy, and didn't even think about how it would be with the connection with their friends being rejected from schools as well as him because they know him. But I did think it would be funny. Wouldn't there be one school out there who would want that publicity, that they actually were the ones that, like, wouldn't you think that you'd want the I have Spider-Man in our school? Or is it because there's a negative connection to him now that you wouldn't want that at all?
Yeah, I'm not sure, because like you said, even I imagine there would be schools that would say they haven't been actually charged with anything either. So, we'll take it and we'll see what happens. Yeah,
like you can say Spider-Man goes to our school, and like that kind of thing was surprising to me that they got off. And I understand because they obviously apply to certain schools. It's not like all these schools are going to contact them.
And I wonder if part of it is, that's an interesting question. I'm trying to think what. I mean, maybe it's kind of same thing. DailyBugle.net. It's making a reference to like, there's people who think Mysterio is right, and there's so many of them that have big money. So like, we're just going to steer clear of it in general.
Yeah. And it makes sense because they don't have to it's not like they need him.
Yep.
And so having someone else, he is a pretty good student. So if take away Spider-Man, he's a smart kid. So any school would want him, but it's just nice that they're like, we're not going to take the risk. Let's get rid of it. And his friends are too much of a distraction. We're not going to put him in there. And then Flash Thompson, who says he's a friend, but like even the schools know he's not really his friend because MIT accepted Flash Thompson.
Like, that scene was brutal. I even have brutal written after my note when he's like, and they're like, well, we were actually friends with Spider-Man.
We're actually Spider-Man's friend.
Yeah. And it was just like, oh.
I still think and I love how there's certain characters that came in here. So like the news anchor was what's her face from the blonde chick from the first couple of movies.
Yeah.
She who does the news broadcast, like the funny at the beginning of Far From Home.
Yep.
And the fact that they brought this 3 teachers in, the gym teacher Hannibal Buress and the 2 other dudes, JB Smoove and the guy from Silicon Valley. I always forget his name. But they brought him in for like one scene. I love how the fact that we're in this movie for literally a scene.
Yes. But
it was just to say they're connecting the 3 films together, and how Hannibal Buress is like, Mysterio was right, man. Like, what are we doing here? This guy is, what are we doing? He's like, the students built this for you. You built this. I tried to stop you like 4 times.
And the guy, the picture of him with Peter and is just literally a cutout picture from his little sad camera in Venice. I mean, that was just,
It was so funny because it's like how drastically different you see that like one teacher is in love with him and the other teacher thinks he's a war criminal still. Because Hannibal Buress was like that on the when they did the Captain America. Is like, I'm pretty sure Captain America is a war criminal now.
Exactly.
And then so as he progressed through the movie, so he's obviously, we'll get back to what the movie's about, is so his identity is outed. He obviously has this, now everybody wants to get after him. Why we know in the comic books and why we know in the movies why he doesn't want people knowing who's Spider-Man is because obviously MJ, Ned, Aunt May, Happy, all these people would be targets for villains and other people to go after, right? And that's the reason why Peter Parker's always stayed quiet about it. He wants to just be friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. No one know who he is. Now everybody knows, he goes to see Doctor Strange. And one of the cool things is that, like, I feel like obviously the comic books have been around for so long that characters have intertwined. But think about 20 years ago Adam, and seeing whether or not they would have actually put Spider-Man and Doctor Strange in the same movie. Like, I feel
Right.
like those characters are not on the same level
Nope.
on the same fans. And so seeing him actually walk through the streets and go to the Sanctum Sanctorum and see Doctor Strange when X-Men was coming out, when the first Spider-Man was coming out, Doctor Strange wasn't even on the radar. Like, they were not like, oh, what are we gonna do next? Is Doctor Strange?
Like, he never even like made the video games back in the day. I mean,
so like, I mean, the idea behind Doctor Strange obviously was created during some trippy times because he does some trippy things. But it's just funny to see him go to Doctor Strange and know to go to Doctor Strange and know that Doctor Strange probably could do something for him.
Of course.
Speaking on that, Adam, one thing I looked up, some fun facts, is that originally No Way Home was actually set to come out after Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Gotcha.
And it was meant to the COVID pandemic change things around. So the script was slightly rewritten. And so they could not include anything that would give away in what you would learn in the sequel. Right. In fact, obviously we know now is the end credit scene, which is another negative thing for me, but a positive thing, was a trailer for Multiverse of Madness. But yeah, this is supposed to come out before. So which is a little weird because now I'm not sure what's happening in Multiverse of Madness and what the connection is, but we'll get there to that. But yeah, he goes and sees Doctor Strange to hopefully say that, can you make this better? Basically, what can you do? And Wong, I love Wong.
You too.
What can you do? He's obviously, don't do that. It's stupid. You're gonna mess something up, and obviously he does, and that leads to a bunch of other villains and people coming from other multiverses, and he's got to put them back, but he wants to save them because they're all evil and they're all dying in their universes. And so Spider-Man and Peter Parker, who he is a great human being, wants to fix them. Obviously, there's trials and tribulations to fixing them. And in the end, again, spoilers, he loses his Aunt May along the way, which he had to lose someone. And we talked about this, right? He had to lose someone. And the theories out there were, Happy? Ned. Someone said Ned was another theory. MJ, obviously, because that's a common storyline. And then Aunt May. And I think they fixed the right one. Right? I think it was the right family member. Obviously, it's the juxtaposition that it was Aunt May, not Uncle Ben, and the connection between that and the fact that she says the correct line from the comic book: with great power, there must also come great responsibility. Whereas in the first movies, they say, with great power comes great responsibility. So not that that's just a nitpicking comic book nerd saying that, because it basically means the same thing.
But which is why we love the Marvel Disney. I mean, it's just like you said, it's like everybody that knew the second she said that. That's the original line. That's the original line. So like that's
and sadly we probably saw it coming too. When she's sitting there, she's dying. You're like, oh my god, she's gonna say it. And she did. And then when they were on the rooftop and they finished. How did you know that sign? Oh, Uncle Ben said it before he died, which is pretty cool. The Sanctum Sanctorum part, I'm sorry, the jokes that Wong makes and Doctor Strange makes, I don't have any of them specifically written down, but like they're just the small little things they went back and forth with. And it was funny about like, we don't have liability insurance, don't slip and fall on the floor, and how someone was shoveling. There was someone shoveling, and it's just, there's a dimension open to some sort of Siberia, and that's why there's snow in there. It was almost like, and he was in sweatpants. It was like Doctor Strange had given up on life.
And like I had his like Columbia sweatshirt on, which was hilarious, and the I forget, the mug was hilarious.
The mug says for Fox's sake. It was for Fox. That's
what it was.
And there's a Fox sake underneath it. But those are the kind of things that I love about Marvel movies. That's not when we go to review the Batman. There is none of that in the Batman. Guarantee you right now. I haven't seen it, but I guarantee you there's no little funny jokes on a mug or little funny snips they say back and forth to each other. It's going to be all serious. And that's something like Peter Parker is trying to save his life basically for what he knows it to be. And they're still joking. And that's, like I said, the whole idea that the people fart at a funeral. It happens. And that's the point where I love how Wong is big. And he's the Sorcerer Supreme. We find that out too, because the blip.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally.
And he goes, oh, you got it in on technicality.
They're
funny. Like two brothers. I love it, like how they connect back and forth with each other. And then obviously you and I, we'll go back to nostalgic here, Adam. Like I grew up watching obviously the first Spider-Mans, like the 5 Spider-Mans. But you know me, I didn't really dive into wanting to see all this Marvel stuff until the MCU. And so like I watched them and I think there were some awesome movies. They just weren't like Tom Holland Spider-Man is my Spider-Man. Like even though I'm 36, he's still my Spider-Man because that's when I fell in love with the Spider-Man movies. Right. And so Tobey Maguire in this movie is awesome. Seeing Andrew Garfield's awesome, but it's more just nostalgic to me than it is like seeing my Spider-Man on the screen again. But yeah, they did amazing.
Oh, they were awesome. And Tobey Maguire, I think, came real close to that where I just felt like, oh my God, I remembered like seeing Spider-Man and that really was, God, I had that on DVD. I watched it 8,000 times while I was in college. So I think Tobey Maguire is maybe a little bit my Spider-Man.
Yeah. And Tobey Maguire looked amazing. Like, I'm sorry. How old was, I meant to look this up before we went on there, but Tobey Maguire is not super young. And he is 46 years old. The dude looked like a 25-year-old. Like it was unbelievable how well he looked when he showed up. And I do appreciate the fact that Andrew Garfield shows up in his uniform, in his suit. Whereas Tobey Maguire shows up in just regular clothing. And that was just, I love seeing that. But before we get fully in there, because I want to dive into that scene where they all show up, is seeing the villains come back. Because we all knew the villains were coming. That's the one thing we did know, that Dr. Octopus was going to be there. We saw the bomb from Green Goblin. We knew that was happening. And so seeing him show up, an iconic villain from the first or older movies, was, again, a villain that people could attach to who didn't see the first movies because it's just a straight up villain, but also fan service to us for like, oh, yes, Alfred Molina's freaking Dr. Octopus. This is amazing. And
that was so good.
And seeing him act in the nanotech and all that stuff was just amazing. Footage. And I saw a clip yesterday of Tom Holland did a lot of those stunts. Like he was sliding across hoods and doing flips and stuff like that. That's him, which amazed me because I can't do a flip on a trampoline. And this guy's acting and on a bridge and jumping off of things and doing flip. It was fun to see. But to see Dr. Octopus come back was really cool.
Yeah, I was stoked about that. And I just, fun seeing him come back and like get to redeem himself. Cause you know, I think the early fans of that movie always were like, you know, he's a good guy. So like, that was fun. Yeah.
The Green Goblin laugh when he showed up. First of all, that I will always say that ridiculous costume. That costume is freaking ridiculous. It's so stupid. I'm sorry. And they did us right by destroying the mask in this movie. But when he showed up on his little flying thing and he goes, you're like, oh my God, William Dafoe.
And I agree. The mask was ridiculous. Just so everybody knows, we have agreement on that.
It's so stupid. It just was like, I don't know. We're real life characters because we're filming a real life movie, like an actual live action thing. And the suit looked cartoonish. It was weird. It was very, I don't know.
It looked like something you bought at Walmart that was a big plastic Green Goblin head.
Correct. And one I will say is that I had a note here somewhere, and I know it, but I don't know where I put it. But for a moment, there it is. For a moment there, when Dr. Octopus is talking to Norman Osborn or talking to Green Goblin and saying, how is that possible? That guy is dead. I wanted it so bad for a hot second there for it to be a Peter Parker. So if anybody out there listens or reads Spider-Verse comic books out there, like the Gwenverse and all those things, Peter Parker doesn't always end up being Spider-Man. In some universes, he ends up being nobody. In some universes, he's dead. In some universes, he becomes the Green Goblin. And so, which would be like that, because if it's an infinite number of universes, there's an infinite number of options. You know, I'm, Peter Parker at some point.
Exactly.
So he's a podcaster at some point. So when he showed up, I was like, oh, I want the twist to be that the Green Goblin is actually going to be Tobey Maguire. And that would be
super cool.
But then I realized that for that second, I was like, it would mind fuck too many people. Too many people would be confused. They're already confused as it is if they've seen the original trilogy. And so if you don't really know what's going on, seeing that would confuse people even more. And I think that was a good and plus I love William Dafoe. So like,
oh God,
him as Norman Osborn was amazing. So I'm glad they ended up doing that the right way. But I felt like for a second there, I wanted him to be, and it happened again when Tobey Maguire showed up in his street clothes.
Right.
I wanted, again, it's like, okay, is this going to be, because he's not wearing a Spider-Man uniform, like what's going on here? Is he going to be something else?
Venom or something, or
Yes,
have the black suit or something like.
And so, but then he was regular, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm happy with that. I'm not disappointed. They could have gone multiple ways and been okay with me. The group laughing at that Dr. Octopus's name.
Oh yeah.
Your name's Otto Octavius, Doctor. No, really? I thought it was amazing. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so funny.
And that's what's so great. Like they just point out the goofy stuff that existed in the original universe. And that makes sense because goofy stuff happens like that in that universe, I guess. So like
there, and you mentioned to me when we were texting back and forth before recording too, that the Easter eggs, I didn't write a lot of them down because there's so many. I realized
I gave up.
There's a website that has like 61 things you didn't see in Spider-Man. I'm like, are you kidding me? There's like Steve Ditko's name is like spray painted on the side of things.
Yep.
On the news broadcast, that ticker tape at the bottom has things like something's looking after his night monkey from the first movie. There's something about
trouble brewing in New Asgard or something like that.
And it's like there's connections for like Thor 4 and all that. It's like there was so much thought put into this. The other thing was how many things are connected to other movies. Like the drawings that MJ made in the first movie are on the wall, and like, who the hell does this?
I know it's nuts. And it's funny when I was texting, this is a perfect time. I'll throw it in. I got fixated on the transition from Peter Parker seeing the Halloween lights going to the Sanctum Sanctorum. That's when I was texting Justin, and I was like, "That's clearly Dracula." Or I said a vampire, I think, and then you suggested Dracula. I still think that shot was so very intentionally set up like that because you could have put witches and wizards on the thing, and it would have been fine, and everybody would have been like, "That makes sense." The fact that they chose a vampire with a wizard hat is really weird.
It is, and it's one of those things that maybe we watch the next 2 or 3 MCU movies and then watch No Way Home again, and that's when you're like, oh my god, that's this thing. It's like sometimes these Easter eggs are like Easter eggs for former things, but also Easter eggs to foreshadow what's coming, and that's the cool thing. So it could be that Dracula. There's a series I mentioned to Adam about Dracula and Doctor Strange in the same thing, and him Dracula hoping that he becomes a vampire and all this stuff. So it's possible that there's that aspect of it to see in the future. Because I mean, obviously, Multiverse of Madness, they really have the ability to do whatever they want, even if it's for a hot second and then they stop it again. Like it's fun to like someone walks through a portal and it's Doctor Strange dressed up in a hula dress,
right?
And then he goes back out. It's like, that was funny, but like doesn't have to really exist for a long period of time. So
I just think with all we know, there's so much horror stuff getting ready to come in kind of in that side of Marvel. It just that I found that. And I also later we'll talk about donuts in this movie.
Yes. So glad to see, what did I write? Glad to see, special effects. When he goes to Doctor Strange and gets the thing, first of all, it's a very hard decision if you think about it. Like the first decision to have some people forget that he is, and that you can tell that he doesn't want a lot of people not to know. And so it's like he wants the bad people not to know, but the good people, like his friends and his family, to know that he's Spider-Man. So making that decision, you can tell as he's telling Doctor Strange over and over, oh no, and this person. And then finally goes, anyone who didn't know if Peter Parker was Spider-Man prior to like whatever day, don't want to know anymore. It'd be a tough decision to have to make to actually go to ask for that to happen, but also the same to make the decision at the end to have everybody forget again. And have everybody not know, including the love of his life and his best friend,
right?
And people like Happy. You see that when he goes to the grave, and that stuff is like, it's crazy to think about. If all of a sudden tomorrow, Adam, no one knew, like your wife woke up next to you and she didn't know that was you.
That's why I told Annie, honestly, like I found that kind of ending a bit like terrifying, which we're getting ready to do this like whole kind of weird shift with like, so I that could make sense, but that idea is. Yeah, terrible.
Like screwing with time. It's just insane to make it. And not even like all of a sudden it happened and you have to figure out what the hell happened to make the decision for it to happen. Like he actually had to be the one that says, yes, let's do this. Knowing it's for the better of mankind. And so on. But it was just crazy to think that he had to do that but my note here says, I'm glad that the special effects for Doctor Strange in this were almost identical to the movie Doctor Strange. So like they didn't mess of the way the mirror dimension looks like. It's like, okay, from now on, that's what Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension looks like,
Yes.
which is mind tripping. It's one of the reasons why Taylor actually doesn't even like Doctor Strange, is because she's like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I can't. Up is down, down is up.
Yes.
But
It
that's
definitely
part of it.
has that Inception vibe to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Like mirror, like buildings falling into buildings, and
Into
trains
buildings.
and-
Yeah, exactly.
But obviously, all that happened, and they fight the villains for a little while there and all that stuff. But then all the Spider-Mans show up,
Yep.
and what we were all hoping for. And I watched it at the theater, like I mentioned. And when Andrew Garfield showed up, and when Tobey Maguire showed up, it was like claps, and it was like I hadn't seen this in a movie in a long time. Which is funny because every once in a while you see someone clap at the end of a movie, and I never understood that, because the only other people in that movie, other than the people watching it, is the guy running the projector, and he didn't make the movie.
I used to wonder about that too. I think you just got to be really excited.
Yes.
Or maybe you think
excited.
there is somebody back there that's just turning the wheel.
Or like
Thanks,
Andrew
dude.
Garfield is actually up there. Like,
Thanks.
oh, I'm in
Good job,
Bangor,
man.
Maine.
Good
I'm gonna
job.
watch this theater here. But him showing up was awesome, and him crawling through the thing, the what do you call it? The ring
Portal.
Yeah. It's a long week already, Adam. And him showing up, and they're like, wait, you're not Spider-Man, going and having MJ having him like, he sticks to the ceiling, and MJ's like, no, can you crawl around? He's like, how the hell do you think I'm doing this? And then Ned's aunt or grandmother or whatever was like, can you clean the cobwebs up in the corner? Like making Spider-Man do your household chores for you.
Yep.
That was amazing.
I mean, there's everything you say, I think of like 100 other things. And I'm like, that scene was great. And then at Ned's apartment, when she's saying that, we see like weird little hints about what's going on with Ned. And like, that's a whole other thing. Like I've never seen, like you said, I gave up on writing notes because I was like, this will take 8 hours.
Exactly. And that's the thing. And so I watched, like I said, I started going through this like 61 things you didn't notice. I'm like, oh, so I rewatched it today, and I was like, I'm going to see if I can find these things so I can see them. And I realized after like the third or fourth thing, I'm like, we'll spend the entire episode just talking about the things that are Easter eggs in this thing.
Exactly.
And that's, you know, there is part of that we'll get to, but like still the favorite line in the entire movie probably is when Tobey Maguire looks at Andrew Garfield. No, sorry, Andrew Garfield looks at Tobey Maguire, and Tobey Maguire still has the street clothes on. And he goes, are you going to change before we go into battle, or are you going to stay a cool youth pastor? And he just like goes like that, and like pulls his shirt down a little bit, and he's wearing his uniform or his suit underneath it. But it was like, oh my God, that's so perfect. Growing up, my dad being a pastor and stuff like that, I was like, oh yeah, he does look like what my dad looked like when he was really cool youth pastor. And again, I like him showing up in his street clothes, Tobey Maguire. In his street clothes. You're like, you didn't know. Again, you're like, is he going to be a Spider-Man? Is he just going to be someone who knows who Spider-Man is? Which is great. The cleaning up the webs when Ned's grandmother was like, can you tell them to clean their webs up when they're done? And then the best, a lot of people have talked about it afterwards, is the idea that Tobey Maguire shoots it from his arm, and the other two have web shooters, and the idea that that's been a controversy in comic books for years. What should it be? Should it be more natural? Should it be shooters? I'm on the more natural side. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me or whatnot, but like the idea that if you got the power of spiders, then spiders don't have web shooters. They have it. They make their own web fluid.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't the person with it just, that one always made. Also, this Peter Parker's smart, but is he smart enough to create something that no one else has created ever in high school in his bedroom? Like that's the other part. Is like, okay, it's unbelievable that he has spider powers, but also more unbelievable that I honestly more believe that someone had spider powers than I would that this teenage boy in his bedroom created web fluid that could swing from building to building.
Right, which would like change the entire world as we knew it. Yeah. I still think that was one of my favorite scenes in the movie though, because I just like, I loved the reaction of them. Like they weren't disgusted, but they were like, wait, you what? And my favorite too is with Tobey Maguire. He's like, do you ever get like a web blockage? And he's like, I've had a web blockage. Well, it was more of like an existential crisis kind of thing.
And he's like, oh, I get that.
Yeah.
But the idea, he goes, did that just come out of you?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. So you make your own fluid? Does it only come out of your wrists, or does it come out of anywhere else? And I don't want to get too personal, but he's like,
oh my God, it was funny.
And it was great because it shows the comic book discussions and arguments that have had for years on whether or not it should be shot out of his wrists or out of his web shooters. And they put it in there, but not as an argument, but as a they're showing both sides of the argument without arguing about it.
Right.
It's more like, this is the argument people have. These are the statements people make, and that's it. Like, that you can actually run out and so on. I like that part. See, that's the other part about it, is I like the idea that it's created from you, but it's also possible that it's created from you. I mean, you pee until you can't pee anymore, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. Like, he could run out if he overuses it. Yeah.
So there is that, you can have that. But again, I don't want to start fights on the internet because of, I like the fact that it comes out of him, and someone else might like it because it comes out of a web shooter. But
I just thought it was funny too, because you remember back in the Tobey Maguire movie, the first time he uses his web, there's a reference. It's clearly like he's a teenager in his room, and she's like, "What are you doing in there?" And like everything's getting all like messed up and stuck together. So I thought that was kind of a funny reference back to that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they all point at each other.
Oh, like that was great. Yes.
Or the animated show, but like the meme that's come out of the animated show,
of course,
was absolutely perfect. And they're all pointing at, and was it Ned goes, Peter? And they all look. And he goes, Parker. And he's like, it's still, we're all Peter Parker. Spider-Man. It's still, we're all the same. Computer. Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me go. Oh, it's something you do. Like, I've done that before, where it's like a couple people in the room with the same name, and you just do it on fun, just for fun.
And they're calling each other Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3. And my favorite is the last time that it happens in the argument, Andrew Garfield goes, fine, Spider-Man 3. Like,
and the fact that they keep on telling him, hey, dude, you're not nobody. Don't stop telling yourself you're nobody.
You're amazing.
You're amazing. I want to hear you say it. You're not lame. You are amazing. I'm amazing.
Yeah. It's like you're doing that talk thing in your head, you know? You're doing that. I forget what he's I needed to hear that. Thank you.
Again, if you have never seen the other Spider-Mans, you would never understand it, but it's still, it doesn't take away from the movie. It's not like you were zoned out for that moment. You're like, why the hell are they talking like that? Like, if you've never seen it before, you would just go back past it, saying he was trying to lift him up and say good things about him. But for us who know what they're talking about, we're like, that's pretty funny. They're making a point that that's the only amazing Spider-Man out of the three of them. The other two were just Spider-Man.
And ironically, the least popular of the three, like by a mile. That's why I love I'm Spider-Man 3.
And then them all talking about, like, again, they're referencing their own universes, the positive things or the negative things, like, when I lost my Uncle Ben, when Amazing Spider-Man lost MJ or Gwen Stacy. And then the villains. Have you ever? What villains have you fought? And they're all like, the other two Spider-Mans, like, they're here. The villains we fought are here. He's like, I fought an alien, and was it Amazing Spider-Man? He's like, I fought an alien. No, Tobey Maguire. I fought an alien too, alien goo. And never actually said Venom, so it's that connection, obviously, that knows about Venom. And then he's like, I've been to space. He's like, wait, you've been to space? How we just glossed over that? Like, you went to space?
Like, you fought an alien? He's like, I fought a Russian guy in a rhinoceros suit.
Again, making it funny because they're not. He's not as the great Spider-Man the other two are. And again, that was only part of the entire banter they have on the Statue of Liberty, waiting for the villains to show up. That was amazing, because they were just having this moment that they never get to talk. They're talking to themselves with different experiences, and they're having this brotherhood. They said, I've never had a brother before, and this is like their brotherhood, and this is a cool thing. So I hope that even if they bring back like Andrew Garfield for one movie and Tobey Maguire for a quick movie in the future, just to have this when they do the Spider-Verse, if they do something more with that, I hope that they have more banter between Spider-Mans like they did on the Statue of Liberty. Oh, the fun one is, you were part of the Avengers? That's cool. What is that? Like, they didn't know. And he goes, are you part of a band? Which to some people might be funny, because Gwen Stacy, or Spider-Gwen in the Spider-Verse, is part of a band with MJ. They're in a band together. Gwen Stacy plays drums. And so I thought that was kind of funny, because it's someone being very happy that someone was in a band. And if they expand the multiverse, Spider-Verse even more, and Spider-Gwen comes into this universe, hopefully they make her part of a band so they can make that joke again, which would be really funny. But we're in the Avengers. That's so cool. What is that?
And I loved that kind of thing too. You've talked about it many times, but in that scene of, like, you forget, man, like, this Spider-Man, like, came on the scene and was like fighting at like a cosmic level from like the beginning. And you would often mention the problem too is that, like, that's never Spider-Man. Spider-Man like lives in a neighborhood and takes care of people he knows. So seeing that kind of thing reversed in this was cool. I mean, like, the fact that Spider-Man hung out on top of his high school and the other two were like Empire State Building, and he's like, oh, I like the Chrysler Building or whatever, you know. And
Andrew Garfield goes, yeah, much better view in the Chrysler Building.
Yeah.
He's trying to be like, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. I've got a better hangout spot.
Exactly.
But yeah, those learning about other people's or universes in that banter and that talking back and forth was amazing story, like way to like wait, like I said, wait for the villains to show up and also having meaningful conversation. And you connect it. Now you're emotionally attached to all three of them, not just our Tom Holland Spider-Man or whatever. You're emotionally connected to all three of them as characters, which is really cool. And then the battle scene was really cool. Obviously, you see a lot of battle scenes like that. Did you know that? So we talked about some of the people that are in the movies. Thomas Hayden Church, who reprised his role as Flint Marko or Sandman, and Rhys Ifans, who was Dr. Kurt Connors / Lizard from the movies. Neither one of them were actually on set. Like, they never stepped foot on set. They did voice recording for when their CGI characters were there. Sure. And they used archival footage from the other movies
totally.
to use when they came back to normal people. And so they never actually were in the movie. So they're not technically listed as starring in the movie. They're listed as, like, I don't know, cameos, I would say, in the movie,
sure.
Which is really kind of cool. And then you had obviously Dr. Octopus and Green Goblin and Electro, which you haven't talked much about. Jamie Foxx.
No,
I think he was great. I think the fact that they made him yellow was amazing. That's the only way Jamie Foxx said he would come back and be the character. So they actually did it right. And so that was pretty cool to see that. I guess no specific villain had a specific, like, they were my favorite. I think all of them had their own moments. And I think it was the collective, I want to make the villains no longer villains anymore.
Right. Was
the actual storyline there.
No, I think that was the brilliant part of it too. And it's that same thing of scaling it back again to Spider-Man and saying that, like, the like that comic book Spider-Man's not just trying usually to, like, defeat bad guys. He's usually trying to help them and get them back to who they were before. So that was a kind of fun way to do that and establish, like, the moral Spider-Man that we know, who, like, never kills people. Never.
Yes. Oh yeah. Speaking of that, they were on the Statue of Liberty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did you hear at the end, when Spider-Man had called into FaceTimed J. Jonah Jameson from Daily Bugle .net, and he said, "Oh, where are you?" He's like, "I'm on the Statue of Liberty." And J. Jonah Jameson goes, "Oh, Spider-Man's gonna ruin another monument," because when he was in DC in the first movie, in Europe in the second movie, and then now he's on the Statue of Liberty. It was kind of funny. He made the joke like, "Oh, he's gonna destroy another monument." Again, making fun of the source material, but not actually just making it just a joke, really.
And speaking of the Statue of Liberty, like, what was up with the cap shield being welded on to the Statue of Liberty? Because here's my thing, man. Even in, like, if we're going to get meta and acknowledge that we're, like, in the Marvel universe, people don't usually mess with the Statue of Liberty iconography. And so then that makes me feel like I'm in another weird universe where
well, when I started reading again last night, I don't know if I've ever read it, if anybody else has ever read it. It's Secret Empire was a serious stories arc that came out for Marvel a number of years ago. And it was when Captain America was brainwashed into thinking that he was actually double agenting for Hydra, and that he was actually a Hydra person this whole time, and so on and so forth. And Captain America became a different kind of icon. And that's the kind of thing too, where I'm like, I don't know, is this like after Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is this weird connection now? Like, it's weird. And it's like one of those things that it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden out of nowhere, the reason why Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is asking Scarlet Witch about the multiverse is because they realized that we were in a different multiverse. That something happened, that we all went to a different universe. And that actually the funny part about it was that Tom Holland was in the wrong one, or something like that. Right.
Or like, and they're all encapsulated in one of those, like, mirror universes. I mean, that honestly, of the whole thing in the movie that they never explained, like, it didn't bug me. I mean, I was aware that they did that for a reason, but I just kept, like, the whole time, every time they'd show it, I was like, this feels like a weird, different timeline. Like,
I was listening to some, like, non-spoilerish reviews from Kevin Smith's podcast, Fat Man on Batman, or Fat Man Beyond, I should say it's called now. His hope was that that's how we're going to introduce to the X-Men, that the Statue of Liberty, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, the multiverses came together, and that X-Men won when and all of a sudden out of nowhere he showed up.
Okay, I want that now again. So
exactly, and it's like that would have been so badass, but also so kind of disappointing that that's how we got introduced to mutants in the MCU.
True.
But in the same sense, it would have been like
the iconography, though.
Oh, it would have been like a full full circle, because that you're talking like
Doctor Strange arcs start turning into that machine that the parts were spinning into. Oh, that would have been good,
because that's like OG. You're talking like that is the farthest back they'll probably go with the multiverse stuff. I don't think they're gonna go to like Lou Ferrigno Hulk or like, you know, stupid Nick Fury straight to DVD agent. Nick Fury on what's his name, David Hasselhoff. Like, I don't think they're gonna do that.
No.
So like X-Men 1 would probably be the farthest back they go.
Yep.
Spider-Man there too. And so I don't think they go any further back. So that would be kind of funny. But I also think that, again, I'd be kind of like, oh shit, that's how we got mutants. Like, I think that's how we get mutants.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think this multiverse thing is how we get mutants. But I don't think that I think because they missed their opportunity, Marvel. The snap.
Maybe I wonder that could still come in, though, and that, like, in a different story, in that X-Men story, they see that coming through at the Statue of Liberty. But man, the Statue of Liberty, and then my other, I'll say now, is the donut thing, which is when they do that weird light with the vampire Doctor Strange. It's a light, a donut, a bat, a donut, or something like that, but it's donut, bat, something. So I just thought that, and it's very like framed, and usually these movies are, and then also later with the Green Goblin, when Aunt May is explaining that like he's lost in the cosmos and he's lost in his mind. Yeah. In the background, he's shoving donuts into his pockets. And then the Iron Man 2, when they go to invite him, which is in What If, he's at Randy's Donuts, sitting in the Randy's Donut sign. So I'm just thinking there's a lot of donut things happening, and I have no thesis for that except watch the donuts.
The other thing is the bat. Morbius is coming soon, and that's technically, this is the only movies that are MCU / or as of right now, we still don't know what the hell is going on and where things stand, and if because I mean, I talked about it. So this week on bonus episodes, I did a whole who is Moon Knight for Wednesday and who is Morbius for Friday, because they're weeks before they come out, and they're kind of characters that some people don't know about. And one of the things I mentioned about Morbius is that he's obviously a vampire thing. Right. And this is one of the only movies that are crossed over between the two, technically, because Sony makes the movie with Marvel. And so they can do things in these things. And those, so the bat might just be
it could absolutely
to that as well. But like, it's interesting to see.
I went down this like really weird rabbit hole, and I was like aware that there was this weird Canadian horror that's called Blood and Donuts. And so I looked at the director or something, and then I found that she had directed 2 episodes of Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and I constructed this whole theory that has no weight to it at all.
Yeah, donuts, man.
But I was really down this whole like, oh, I bet they're bringing this person in. And
actually, in the end, doesn't she give Ned a donut? MJ serves Ned a donut.
She does serve Ned, and
he's sitting at the bar, and
she works in Peter Pan's donut shop.
And they recreated that, by the way, in New York City. It was actually an old thing, but they she walks over and gives Ned a donut too. So there's some with donuts here.
Donuts.
And in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, there's donuts they feed to the.
That's right.
Now connection there, but so the donor of it all. No, with Ned and MJ now not knowing that it exists. I like how they ended this movie.
Me too.
Whereas he didn't try to get them back.
I agree, 100%.
But there's a point here that I want to make to see if you can correct me on it or not. First of all, I like when they all disappeared, that they disappeared differently than the snap.
Yep.
They just like floated away and into mist. It wasn't I'm glad it wasn't this exact same disappearing into snap. But how would MJ and Ned be friends if it wasn't for Peter?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If you go back to the first movie, they don't like. They are both on the they're both part of the decathlon,
which
so they wouldn't know each other.
Maybe this is the problem, right? Is that to do even one person, let alone the number of people he did, like all kinds of things have to be rewritten and forgotten, which changes entire timelines. Because as we know at the end, now Peter's studying for his GED because there's no record of him ever going to school or anything.
So is it just that they took his name and everybody's like, they just removed that section that there's maybe if you asked Ned or MJ, how did you meet? They might actually go, I don't even know. Like they don't remember meeting because they met through Peter and they pulled Peter out of there. But all they know now is that they know each other and they're friends with each other now. Like it's possible that there's that.
Sure.
Or
I feel
pulled
like
them out of it and they knew each other from Decathlon and it was an easily connectable thing.
I just wonder if the spell is so big it rewrites timelines, and so that's what causes everything to implode going into like multiverse of madness and what we saw in Loki, and is all of a sudden there's like 8 million new timelines that spring out of this.
But I'm glad they didn't make him like fight for her right then. Like,
I agree.
It would be weird. Like, I hope we've talked, and I have a little section here called Future, and I can throw that in there right now. It sounds like there's going to be 3 more films. Sony's looking to make 3 more Spider-Man films, and that looks like there's a strong possibility that at least one of them is Tom Holland in it. So is it a Tom Holland's in it for the first 5 minutes and then it passes the torch to someone else?
Sure.
Or do we see MJ, Ned, and Peter Parker become friends again through normal situations? And that's when, and then he slowly tells them again that he's Spider-Man, and they deal with that whole thing again. We don't know. But I'm happy that they didn't force it and that he just, you know, she obviously knew. She was wearing the necklace.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. And I loved that she ended with like, don't say I love you, just tell me when you find me. Like that was, you know, I thought that was such a perfect way to stop, like end that.
And he'll do it at the right time. He'll find the right time. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. But I feel like it's necessity for the Spider-Man story, unless they basically say now that was Spider-Man's story. Now we're going to Miles Morales, which is still possible. But I feel like you can't have Miles Morales without closing. Like you can't have Miles Morales, in my opinion, without Tom Holland, Spider-Man on the same screen as Miles Morales. Like I think you need them both there, to him teaching him, or even maybe Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield is the one teaching Miles Morales. That would be cool too.
Exactly. Sure.
I think you need another Spider-Man to pass the torch to the other Spider-Man in a sense. Even though like in the Spider-Verse movie, Miles Morales becomes Spider-Man because the other Spider-Man dies.
Yes.
But then the multiverse, the Spider-Verse helps them train. So I feel like they need to have both of them on there to help us or help the non-huge fans emotionally track between one Spider-Man to another.
I agree. I really, though, if the Spider-Verse keeps going, we have to have live action Nick Cage at some point.
Yes.
We have to.
And I also want Spider-Ham as well. I'll tell you right now.
Oh my God.
Porker Spider-Ham.
No doubt. I just can't. I just want Nick Cage as live as Spider-Man Noir so bad that like.
How is it not possible? You don't need to have him there. You just have him voice act someone in a suit. He doesn't have to actually take his hat on, his thing off, his mask off. You could just have someone CGI'd in there, but he's in the actual thing, which makes.
Oh my God.
And he better be in Spider-Verse too. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah, I hope so.
Nick Cage, you hear his new movie coming out, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. It's a movie about Nick Cage.
I've been reading about it.
100% on Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah. Like when has a Nicolas Cage movie ever gotten 100% on Rotten Tomatoes?
Did you see that movie Pig he put out recently?
I heard it was very good.
Fantastic.
Yes, I heard it's very good.
The rise of Nick Cage.
The rise
again.
He's so fun. There's certain things that you have to know. Nicolas Cage acts like Nicolas Cage. As long as you can get past that, he is good in things. It's just he thinks he's better than he actually is. And he tells it on the screen basically. So he's very animated and makes the same things. But so does Vince Vaughn. So does Jim Carrey. So does all these people. So like Will Ferrell. They all do the same thing. But Happy and Peter at May's grave. I have that as a note. That's emotional too. I think it's funny that. I guess it would probably flip Happy's wig a little bit if Peter says that she's my aunt, because then he would be like, well, why didn't I know you?
Of course.
But the fact that how does Happy know? Happy, I guess, knows who's Spider-Man. He knows of Spider-Man, but how does I got confused there because if he said, how do you know Aunt May? And he goes through Spider-Man. Happy only knows Spider-Man as Spider-Man now, not as Peter Parker, but how is Spider-Man connected to Aunt May at that point? I guess in the first movie or second movie, was the first movie where he does or it was the beginning of the second movie, right? Where he does the like fundraiser thing. So maybe that's where he knows Spider-Man through that. I don't know. It just seemed weird that he used Spider-Man as the connection, not.
Well, and I'm writing this down before I forget it, because you were the one that brought it up. The like kind of what happens when all these what happens if everybody forgets like old friendships. But I'm thinking how huge this is in the story. What happens if Tony Stark forgets about him? Like, isn't that part of where he like really starts developing? Well, so here's the thought: people.
Tony Stark's dead at this point, so like he would not that he wouldn't have known. Maybe because he's dead, he wouldn't have not known. But I'm thinking if he never existed in all of time. It's a lot of things that change.
And
a lot
exactly.
of things. Or like I said, is it just this weird thing where they pluck the memory of Peter Parker out of you?
Yep.
All the stuff still happened, just no one can pinpoint in their minds.
Exactly.
It just like you start to flip out, you start to shake a little bit, like I don't know why.
Which
like,
that itself is wild, even if that's the answer.
Which is it's a weird thing how magic works, and to me, it's like I feel like magic only works as long as the spells. Like, is it possible that this is going to run out at some point, or is it possible that someone reverses it and all of a sudden, or some people know? I feel like there's still some more story. Like I feel like they capped off his trilogy, but also there's more storyline to go, so that they can go further, or we can just forget it now. Like you move on for a while, and Spider-Man comes back in 3 or 4 years, and it's Miles Morales, and the reason why is because the Spider-Man dies in that movie or whatever. But like I don't know, it's a very I think we could spend an entire podcast on just theorizing of what would change if Spider-Man didn't, or Peter Parker didn't exist.
Yep. It is. Like you said, as soon as you said that though, I just thought, man, like Tony Stark had such a, like that would change a fundamental part of the whole MCU if he'd never met him. So who knows? His
new apartment, when he walks into that at the end one, reminds me so much of Tobey Maguire's first apartment in the first Spider-Man, that like I wanted it to be the same apartment. Like so badly. I wanted them to on purpose be the same apartment of the first Spider-Man, just to have us like cool, like, you know, full circle thing that he's now living in an apartment in it, you know, because obviously Happy, he doesn't know Happy anymore. He doesn't know anybody with money anymore. So he has to actually live his life. He's alone. And that's the other part you don't talk about, because he's completely alone. No one knows who Peter Parker is.
I wonder now, you know, if we keep him around, he's going to start freelancing doing photography, because he can get these great shots, which would be fun. That apartment thing you said too made me think of, remember the original Sega Spider-Man?
Yep.
And it starts with him walking back and forth on the apartment ceiling, and it's that same sparse, like 2-color brown and cream apartment.
I love the fact too, when the landlord leaves, he goes, rent's due on the first of the month. I'm like, I've never lived in an apartment where rent wasn't due on the first of the month. So I don't know why that's a statement you have to say to anybody, but like, and that's the only thing you say to them. You don't say, oh, trash compactor's on the first floor. It's rent's due at the first of the month. That's all you know. But yeah, I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a kind of a cool throwback, and I thought there would be more to it. Like I thought when I saw it, I'm like, oh my God, it's the first apartment that Peter Parker was in. And it wasn't. They just moved on. It was just another apartment, which is kind of cool. But I thought it'd be kind of cool to add, if you're adding all these Easter eggs in, it would have been cool not to even say anything about it, but actually have it be like the set from the first movie, like recreate the set.
Well, that would have been excellent. Yeah.
The other thing is as we finish this up, is at the end where he pulls out, his suit looked way more blue and red. First of all, like way more bright blue and red when he left the window, and he obviously showed that he sewed it himself again and all that stuff. That's going back to, and again, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man now, because no one knows that. And the idea that he can do freelancing now, all that stuff is showing back to the original storyline, and that's pretty cool of him creating his own suit. But he knows his skills have obviously gotten better because the suit looks better than his first suit.
But now the Sony with the video game too, like, you know, now they can mess with the suit a little bit, which is what they do in the video game. And so,
but it ending at Christmas time, right? So it ends in the snow in New York City, is why we didn't get a crossover with Hawkeye. To me, even just having him swing by in Hawkeye, or when he swung by on the end of this movie that you didn't see, like the battle, because they were at Rockefeller Center. It's supposed to have happened right around the same time. It would have been so much fun to see the Hawkeye / crossover with MCU on, and maybe it's because of the Sony thing. I don't know.
And correct me if I'm wrong, in the Miles Morales Sony Spider-Man game, that's when they meet, is at Christmas. So maybe we're getting ready to introduce him.
Question, Adam, is this now a Christmas movie because there's Christmas in it?
I don't know, but as I was doing the research, I heard suggestions that Spider-Man, the Raimi Spider-Man, may be one of the most appropriate Thanksgiving movies. So now,
and there isn't many of those.
And I know, and so now I'm pretty keen on that. As far as the Christmas movie, it totally could be, especially when, like you said, Hawkeye. Man, you could have a whole little Marvel Christmas season.
Yes, I think it was just cool because it was like, but it connected. It without connecting them, physically seeing them, it still connected them in a way that's saying, unlike DC, it's my DC diss for the episode. It's a real place. Like Rockefeller Center exists. There's a tree in Rockefeller Center. It looks the same. So when you saw it on Hawkeye, and then you see the opposite side of him flying by it, it's the exact same place. So the show is connected, the location's connected, and all that stuff's connected without actually physically showing Hawkeye. You know, on the show. I wanted to go over a couple quick fun facts before we finish this up. I wanted to go over the mid-credit scene and post-credit scene as well. But did you know they didn't give the entire script to anybody on the? Usually, when you go to a movie, they give you this big stack of papers that has the entire script on it.
Yep.
What they gave people is their scripts for their own lines only. And it was a way to combat spoiling plot lines of the thing. So, which is pretty fascinating.
I've seen other movies do that. And honestly, I think it gets really good responses out of people too sometimes, because you hear the person saying it back to you and it kind of, can get kind of shock you and put you back. So,
which is awesome. Marissa Tomei actually spoiled the ending to her therapist. And I said, that's amazing. Cause I guess every Hollywood person, like Tom Holland, spoiled enough stuff just by speaking about stuff on the internet. If you should, every time you sign a Marvel movie, you sign up for a Marvel movie, sign the dotted lines in a Marvel movie, they should assign you a therapist.
Yes, who you can talk to.
It's covered by Marvel that you can talk to, and she's bound by legal doctor-patient confidentiality.
You can talk about other stuff too, but
like if you want to get it off, and you just need to tell someone else, you can tell your therapist, because they are bound by a law that they can't say anybody else. So, well, they are too, but they sign an NDA. But I'm
happy to do that job for someone if they'd like it. So
can I just do that in all of Hollywood? Just be like, I'm the person you come to.
I'll sign an NDA. All you do is text me and talk about it. And I'm like, I know, man, that's a heavy burden to bear.
Couldn't that be awesome? Then you just show up on like red carpets now. You're like, oh, what are you? Oh, I'm the therapist of the stars. Yeah. You help them with their problems? No. I just listen to them.
No, like
about their movies.
You know every ending, and you're like, I know everything. But
you're on your deathbed, and you're just like, they can't come after me. So on June 3, this is originally Morgan, Tony Stark and Pepper Potts' daughter, was supposed to be in this film. She actually showed up. Lexi Robb, the actress who played Morgan in Endgame, even filmed the scenes in the movie. However, they were cut prior to the film being released. That's fascinating. I don't know what connection that would have had, but that was kind of cool. We knew that when the first trailer dropped for this movie, it was watched 355.5 million times in the first 24 hours, which was a new record for trailer views in the time frame. And the big one, again, connecting it to Hawkeye. Did you see when he was swimming through at the very beginning with MJ, again, another Easter egg, swinging through Times Square, there was an ad for Rogers the Musical?
It did. Yep.
Again, connecting the worlds together without actually seeing the people in it, which is really cool to me. Lastly, so that movie was great. We'll talk about the mid-credit scene really quickly. Eddie Brock at the bar.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But also confuses the shit out of me.
No shit, it does.
Like, are we in the universe? Are they not in the Sony universe? It's, like I just mentioned, that the Vulture showing up in Morbius tombs, like Michael Keaton, who was in the first movie, is going to be in Morbius, which is in a different technical universe. Like, does that happen? Like, is the reason why Morbius came out after No Way Home is because the multiverse brought one of the two characters to this universe? I don't know how that's going to work.
Well, and just the whole, like, the symbiote being left behind.
Yes.
Like, I mean, because now we know there's symbiote in both universes. And then I'm like, isn't there a hive mind thing with Venom? Like, what could that mean?
Well, that's the thing. So I'm trying to figure that out. And maybe this is, like I said, the mutant thing. The fact that we don't know how mutants are coming into the universe. Sure. Is this how the symbiote comes into the universe now? Is through this whole thing. And that's the origin story, basically, is now the guy behind the bar, who is actually on the show Ted Lasso.
Yes, he is.
It becomes the first person to be overtaken by the symbiote, and then it's someone else gets it, and then Eddie Brock gets it, and so on and so forth. In the Marvel side, and that's the way that Marvel and Sony have an agreement that Sony can make their own Venom movies. We'll make our own Venom movies, and that's how the symbiote. At some point. I feel like at some point they're all going to go, and then Sony and Marvel aren't going to come to agreement anymore, and they're going to separate, and they're going to make their own things, and they're going to be able to make their own things with agreement that they're okay to co-produce it, but they're not.
Well, I just like you said, I wonder like if the guy that played Danny Rojas or anybody like that was. I mean, I'd be fine with him as a new Venom and just ditch Eddie Brock, and I know that Eddie Brock's off in his universe, but that whole thing was like, I feel like it worked because Venom is so bizarre. Mm-hmm. That like that's exactly how that like the original movies like I said I liked him, but like that's like how just absolutely confused he was, because that is a weird scene for him. Like he's in a hotel room and then he's in another hotel room. Like on his end, there's nothing of the stuff we know.
No, and it's so, and he was in the hotel room, and then I'm guessing that's the bar
I'm
in
guessing,
the place that he's at.
Yep.
And he's like, I got to go to New York City to see this Spider-Man guy. And so here's my other thought: is we watched Venom. That trailer almost seems like Venom licks the screen, right?
Yes.
Remember but like at the bar, he's like, I guess I got to go see the Spider-Man guy. But Venom was already on board with that, so it seemed like Eddie just had to be convinced when they were talking. And he's like, oh, it was a billionaire guy in an iron suit. A big green guy and a villain that was purple who liked a lot of rings or gems. Yep. And again, it sounded like Eddie Brock never actually said the characters' names. So that to me also seems to me like, does he have the right to say the characters' names?
Oh, that's true too.
Do you know what I mean? Is there like one of those things that Marvel is like, no, you can't. Like, yes, if you want to connect them on your own way, and it's an ambiguous way of connecting the two films together, you have the right to use both characters because we're co-producing these, but you can't say them. So he said a purple guy, a green guy, and a billionaire iron guy. Or in a metal suit. And I got to go see the Spider-Man. Obviously, Spider-Man is in both universes, technically. Yeah. But then it leaves a lot. And this is MCU is Earth 199,999. So 199,999 is the technical Earth number for MCU. And so he leaves the symbiote behind. And then Danny Rojas is like, he didn't pay his tab.
Yeah.
And he does this I think it's cool that we're morphing away. It's like almost like a mist.
Yeah, totally.
Sorts. It's kind of cool.
Feels kind of like Shang-Chi kind of magic.
Yep. And then so that was the mid-credit scene. The post-credit scene kind of was, to me, was like a cop-out.
It was just a mini trailer. Like
it was a what, 2 minute, maybe a minute and a half trailer of Multiverse of Madness, which is great because some of the big footage we saw on the big screen, we saw in the theaters, again confused me because it's Doctor Strange 2 is a Marvel movie. And that's a Sony movie, so it's a post-credit scene that someone didn't technically pay to have it in. It's Sony promoting a Marvel movie, which is weird to me, a Disney movie.
It's totally weird.
And
did it just feel jarring to you when it did the like coming soon to a theater near you? I was like, oh, come on, dude.
Like it could have shown a scene from the movie and it would have been happier. Like one of those clips that you showed, like just have the opening scene. The scene where he I say it's maybe not the opening scene, but like when Doctor Strange is walking through the trees. Yep. And
that would have been perfect.
Just show the first 3 minutes or minute and a half of that and just saying some sort of line that makes you go, oh my God, and then end it. The fact they put a trailer in there was kind of like, we don't have anything. Or the old end credit scene that was supposed to be there because of the flip flop of
right.
That scene was actually going to be now at the end of Multiverse of Madness because it sets up the next movie.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
And they didn't want to go with COVID and all this other stuff. They didn't want to go revisit that. But again, what they could have done is just showed a minute and a half, 30 seconds of the movie.
I agree.
Happy. So
no, I'm glad you said that because I was just like, man, like that mid-credit scene, I was like, that's great. And then it was like 1999 in the movie theater. Coming soon to a theater near you. Doctor Strange.
Home box office presents.
Yep.
That was the fun facts, the future of Tom Holland. I think I got all my notes out, which I wanted to get out. However, what was the other thing? Oh yeah, I already said about the Thomas Hayden Church and those kind of things. Oh, and then Eddie Brock reprises his role from the Sony Spider-Man universe. SSU is what they're calling it now.
Okay. Not the Spider-Verse.
It's called the Sony Spider-Man universe, SSU.
I would have just called it the Spider-Verse.
The SSU sounds like some sort of military organization or some sort of like Nazi. It's some sort of Nazi organization from the comic books. But okay, we'll Sony, you got your thing. Sony, I don't understand. I do understand. You made $1.885 billion on this, but if you offered to Marvel or Disney for $4 billion the rights to Spider-Man back, I'm pretty sure they'd sign the check tomorrow.
I feel like they would give you $10 billion tomorrow because Disney knows that they just need.
So if you were to say, here's the idea, they made almost $2 billion on this, right? Here's a $2 billion check, and here's 5% of every Spider-Man movie that Spider-Man's ever in ever again. That's guaranteed income until, again, who knows? Sony might not be around for that long. Sony might actually sell, and maybe that's why they're.
Sure.
It might be one of those things where they're trying to make some quick money now, and then they eventually bring the value up of the company. Now they just had a $2 billion movie, and then they try to sell to Marvel or to Disney, and Disney might be like, "We'll buy it and then sell all the other assets except for Spider-Man." Yeah. Like it's. I feel like at some point in the next 10 years, Spider-Man is going to be under the House of Mouse at some point because I don't see it. This whole co-producing thing going very long. Other than, I guess they have 3 more movies.
And I'm like, or I could see a thing where like they retain the video game rights for
Yep.
PlayStation and like they get to be involved in a fun way in that. But you know,
which is fine because
exactly. That's what they do.
Disney doesn't make good video games. So why wouldn't you just let Sony make them? I just don't like it. It baffles me that, again, the fact that this movie made this much money is awesome for us comic book fans and comic book movie fans, but it doesn't help Disney's ability to buy Spider-Man from Sony.
Not at all.
If Disney only made 10% of that, Sony made a shit ton of money off of this movie. Yeah. So, but again, I went and saw it in the theaters. I think we don't do this whole like rating of it, but I do think that if I had to give it to someone and say go see it in the theaters, I would say go see it in the theaters. That's our scale.
Oh, absolutely. I wish I'd
wait for video on demand or go see it in the theaters. Go see it in the theaters is our consensus. I would agree if you agree with me on that.
Oh, I absolutely. I mean, man, this was like, I enjoyed this even more than not a review, like than even Infinity War. I just like, this movie made me feel like I was like 1990s Spider-Man fanboy again. Like it was just.
And the biggest thing is they brought all those things in, Adam, and made it a good movie. Like it wasn't like clunky because they brought all these aspects in. Everyone had a point to be there. Yep. Every single thing they did, when the Spider-Man's coming in was very similar to Spider-Verse, the animated one, where you needed these people to stop whatever things were going on. And they were all in agreement. We need to cure these people so they don't go back and get killed again. And it made sense. And it wasn't that they did half-ass. They didn't just get Tobey Maguire and not Andrew Garfield, or just Andrew Garfield, not Tobey Maguire, or one of the villains, or, you know, they were able to get the people we saw from the first 5 movies. And again, brought those 5 movies to people that are younger than myself. Say there's an 18, 19, 20-year-old who went and saw this in the theaters, who now own the first trilogy and the 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies on DVD or Blu-ray, or watch them all at least. It brings those back, and Sony is smart about that because they own the rights to all those movies, and they probably sold a shit ton of more copies of those movies because of this. So it's a smart thing all around, and I think they did a great job with it. It wasn't clunky.
No, not at all. And like I said, I think Disney understands too that we like to keep our imagination from when we were kids. I mean, that's kind of their whole stock in trade. And that's one thing I love is like the Raimi thing I know is like a thing. So I don't have to pretend like it wasn't part of the Spider-Man thing, but I love that I now know that like Otto is a good guy. Like, and I just think that kind of thing for like you and I who grew up, like to see these storylines still kind of having life is just, it's fun.
It's amazing. Cause again, so when Marvel brought Charlie Cox over from Daredevil to the MCU, I started watching Daredevil again. Like I'm watching the whole thing over again, everything. Because I feel like if they're going to bring Jessica Jones in, why wouldn't they bring in Kristen Ritter? If they're going to bring in Luke Cage again, why wouldn't they bring in Michael Coulter? They're going to bring in, you know, the Punisher again. Why not? His name's John. I forget Berthemol or whatever.
I think,
he was in Walking Dead. Why wouldn't you bring him in? I do think they're going to skip Iron Fist. I do think if they bring Iron Fist in, they're going to recast Iron Fist. And it has nothing to do with the actor who played Iron Fist. It has to do with the fact that it was a whitewashed, like we have Asian characters playing kung fu style people. And we don't need a white guy.
No, and even if he's from Brooklyn, like he doesn't have to be a white guy.
Yes.
Which, you know, we're starting to see Marvel saying a lot with Shang-Chi and stuff. Like, oh yeah, I mean, people are all over the world, all kinds of people.
So I think the idea though is just like this. I think this Charlie Cox or this Matt Murdock is not connected to the Daredevil. Like, I don't think that like this Charlie Cox has lived through the 3 seasons of Daredevil, because it also would be hard because Marshawn Ali, who is going to be playing Blade, was also Cottonmouth on Luke Cage. So it's kind of hard for him to play 2 characters in the same universe. So I don't think there's that, but it may be that like certain of the shows, like even if they bring Kristen Ritter over as Jessica Jones, maybe hers doesn't exist where she created her thing, even though some of the best TV I've ever seen in my life was the first season with Purple Man or
oh my God,
with David Tennant was unbelievable. Just seeing that over, but I watched it. But the same thing with this whole thing, Spider-Man thing. It's like I couldn't potentially convince Taylor to watch the first 5 Spider-Man movies. Right. But once she saw this, she's like, well, they're connected technically. So now I can go back and watch them. They're prequels to this movie.
Well, now now there's all kinds of Easter eggs for her there now, because she'll see all the scenes that were framed from the original movies, which that's a whole other thing we can talk about another time. But
That would be fun, actually, in a little while to do that. But speaking of, as we close this up, speaking of Sam Raimi is actually the director of In the Multiverse of Madness with Doctor Strange.
Yes.
Which is pretty cool.
Which is wild. Yeah.
That connection here with the Doctor Strange in this movie, going to the next movie, he gets another character to play around with, and the fact that he's known for his horror movies.
I know.
And so the scariness, like the more darker, scary part of this is going to be in up front, because he's actually used to doing that. Yep. And so I'm excited for that. That's going to be really exciting. It comes out in May. And then after that is Thor, Love and Thunder. And so we're going to get some Thor stuff coming too. In the meantime, we got Moon Knight coming out on March 30th.
I know.
That's going to be fun. I mean, I was just thinking Moon Knight comes out March 30th. Obi-Wan Kenobi comes out May 25th. Yep. And I think there hasn't been an announcement yet, but I'm pretty sure that Bad Batch is in there somewhere too. So if you're a Star Wars fan.
So.
And May 25th. June 8th is Miss Marvel. They just announced that. So they're coming out too. So there's going to be a time here where there's like Wednesdays, there's multiple shows to watch with Obi-Wan being on TV at the same time as Miss Marvel too. So that's going to be kind of interesting. And then we got more coming too. So I think now we're past the lockdown phase of the pandemic where people can actually like work and they're making things are starting to catch up, and we're going to get a lot of this stuff.
I think so too.
Because I think this film was even filmed like 2 years ago. So this film was weird. Like
everything's weird. Yeah.
It's so weird to see some of these things that like Morbius is actually finally coming out. And I think it was originally supposed to come out in the summer of 2020. And now it's coming out in the spring of 2022. And so the movie's been done on the shelf, ready to go for 2 years. I wonder if they made any edits. Do you think they've done that in that time?
Man, I mean, I feel like there seems to be enough connections between just even loosely with the MCU that they have to probably have edited some things. Like you said, they probably were thinking the movie is going to come out in a different order. And
well, I think Venom, at least it wasn't Venom. It was probably supposed to come out before Venom too. So like there's that even that connection.
Well, that's
too,
true.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's weird. And it's very weird.
It's all very, just to bring it full circle, it's all very timey-wimey, as Dave Tennant would say in Doctor Who as his iteration.
David Tennant, man. That guy is brilliant.
He is. He's fantastic.
The world of Spider-Man movies is now 11 movies deep. So you can get in on that. It's pretty cool. There's 3 first movies to 2 Amazing Spider-Man movies, and then the 3 Spider-Man. They're calling them the Avengers Spider-Man movies online. I thought I saw someone. So it's you have Raimi / Maguire. You have I'm going to forget his name now. Garfield one, but the guy, the one guy did both those movies.
Sure.
And then you have, what do you call this one? Because they're different directors and just different writers and but there's like, you call it the John Watt series. I think it's called the Avengers because it's all part of the Avengers series. And then we'll see what happens. I want Miles Morales really badly.
I do too.
Morales. I want Spider-Gwen as well. So let's see what happens. A Miles Morales Spider-Gwen movie together would be perfect.
Oh, it would be amazing. And like Venom stuff coming in, anything with the symbiotes is, it's going to be fun, man.
Prowler, you bring Kingpin.
Oh God. Yes.
Like they did in the Spider-Verse movie. Why can't you just bring Kingpin, Prowler, all these other villains that well, and Miles Morales, if anybody doesn't know, Miles Morales has a current comic book that's going on, which is excellent, but there's some new characters that are also being introduced in the Miles Morales stuff. So you can go to some villains that are not iconic 1960s, 1970s, 1980s villains. You can go to like villains that like were created in the 2000s. Right. Some really cool ones. And I want to give the name and spoiler, but it's actually Miles Morales of the future. So that's a cool idea too behind doing some stuff like that and seeing what they can do. But the Prowler is one that we haven't gotten yet that I'd love to see come into a Marvel movie in the future.
That could be a really good series too, even like tying in.
Oh, maybe that's how Tom Holland's last hurrah is a TV show. Why wouldn't you? Like if you just like, I'll go do 2 episodes of a TV show. He introduces, and then he's done. Like that would be fine.
Introduce Miles in Prowler. That'd be kind of neat.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I love the iteration of MJ. Zendaya did an amazing job.
I do too. She's fantastic.
Ned Leeds was a great character in there. Aunt May as Miss Marissa Tomei, rest in peace, Aunt May, but she played an excellent character. I love Happy Hogan. Jon Favreau is my man. He got a big deal. Did you hear about that?
No.
Well, I don't know. They didn't put the numbers out there, but they said the numbers were hard to walk away from. Jon Favreau is in charge of Star Wars television for Disney.
That's nice.
So you have Kathleen Kennedy's probably helping him. but she's in charge, I guess, of Star Wars
great.
movie stuff, and he's in charge of Star Wars television.
I love that. That's perfect.
If him and Filoni can make TV stuff, I'll be happy. So.
Oh yeah.
But I guess until next time, we'll talk more. It's been a while.
I could talk about this for like 4 more hours, but
I know. I tell you, 90 minutes.
I've already watched it 3 times.
Yeah, me too. And they're long. But guess what?
I watched it today.
Every time I've watched it at home, I've had to pause it in the middle.
Yes.
Take a bathroom break. So that's why my whole thing about 90-minute movies is. And when someone said you should go see Batman in the theaters, I said, I'm going to wait for it to come out on digital because I'm going to have to go to the bathroom in the middle of that 3-hour movie. And I know, I mean, I've heard it's really good. Really good.
Oh, absolutely. I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait to see it. And guess what? They're actually putting it on the screen 45 days after. So I could wait the 45 days.
Awesome.
I don't need
totally.
So we'll do a review of that one too. So
cool.
But yeah, sweet. Amazing Spider-Man, or not Amazing Spider-Man. Spider-Man.
Yeah.
No Way Home. Spider-Man Go Home.
See it a few times, and then watch it some more because I'm still every time I watch it finding stuff. So
Spider-Man Go Home. That's the next movie.
Spider-Man Go Home.